Now today, KTM announced the full details of their much anticipated Super Adventure S EVO, and so in this video we'll go through all of the details with everything that you need to know about it. Now EVO is generally the name that KTM give to their most performance biased, top spec, top price models like the 1390 Super Duke EVO, but this, I believe, is the first ever time that they've used it for the Super Adventure lineup. The big thing that's going to separate this bike from the standard 1390 Super Adventure S, which is due to be unveiled in a couple of days, is the fact that it's available with their AMT or automated manual transmission, which again is not only a first for the Super Adventure but also the entire KTM lineup. Now it's not a big surprise because they already showed a prototype at a recent Enduro event, but basically this AMT system uses both a centrifugal clutch and an electronic actuator on the gearbox, and that means you can run it in an automatic mode and therefore the rider doesn't have to do anything with their hand or foot in terms of the clutch or the gears. We made a much more in-depth video about this KTM system. It's a little bit different to everybody else's, so do check that out if you haven't already. I'll put a link to it in the description. But yeah, the long and short of it is you can ride it like an automatic, or you can stick it in the manual mode and choose the gears yourself with the buttons on the switch gear. Is this reason enough to choose the EVO version though over the standard bike? Well, I did recently try out AMT on the Yamaha MT-09, which is one of the first bikes on the market or available on the market to use an AMT system, and I was impressed with some things about it. The clutch was pretty decent, the gear changes were really quite slick, but it is a bit unpredictable with regards to when it changes gear, and so I found myself largely using it in the manual mode, and I would have just preferred to shift with my foot with a quick shifter rather than using the buttons. So I think, probably personally for me, I'd still be going with the manual version. There is another differentiating factor though with the EVO model, and that's the fact that it gets their active cruise control powered by a front-facing radar as standard, and we're yet to see whether that's still going to be the case with the standard model that, like I say, gets announced in a few days. And it isn't just the same active cruise control from the previous iteration of the Super Adventure, the 1290. They've actually developed it a bit, so physically the radar at the front is a little smaller so it doesn't impact the look so much, but then also they've given it some more features. So along with adaptive cruise control, they've given it brake assistance, collision warning, and distance warnings. In fact, they even say that this new system ties in with the AMT, and so it can actually come to a complete stop if the traffic in front of you slows down and also comes to a complete stop. It'll just shift down the box and pull in the clutch, and then as soon as that traffic moves away, the bike can just let out the clutch on your behalf and start moving off, and then presumably work its way back up to motorway speeds by going up through the box without you even having to do anything. Sounds impressive. I've tried cars with that level of active cruise control, and when you do get really heavy traffic, it is actually quite useful. But the only thing is you don't have to balance in a car, and so I'd imagine you're gonna have to keep pretty alert as to when the traffic's about to move off, so you know to, get yourself set. On top of that, they also say from a safety perspective, they've made a few tweaks like improved truck detection, a higher maximum speed, and also updated cancellation thresholds and a dynamic street and group ride function. Presumably the group ride feature is gonna be tuned into other bikes around you and maybe be a bit less sensitive to keeping a distance from them. So yeah, I think those are the key features of the EVO and also the most techie things about this new bike, but there are some tweaks to the fundamentals, like the engine. It's gone from a 1290 to a 1390, and although it doesn't quite get an extra 100cc of capacity, it does go up by about 50. I think the 1290 was 1300cc and this new one is 1350. Not only that, but it also gets their new camshaft technology, which is variable valve timing and valve lift. So at lower revs it prioritizes a bit of torquiness and efficiency and emissions, but then as the revs pick up it shifts over to a different cam profile and it gives it more lift on the intake cams as well as longer cam openings, and so yeah, that's what gives you a proper boost in terms of top end power. So instead of the 160 horsepower I believe of the previous generation, or somewhere around that mark for the 1290 Super Adventure, it's now 173 PS, which is what, 171 horsepower, something like that, and peak torque comes in at 145 newton meters at 8,000 RPM, which I think is about 7 newton meters up. So really quite impressive figures, and puts it within, just a few horsepower of the most powerful adventure bike on the market, which is the Multistrada V4 from Ducati. On top of the engine changes though, they do say they've tweaked the chassis a bit. There's a new design for the frame which has got optimized stiffness values which they say give it better handling and stability. And then also the latest generation of their in-house WP suspension brand's semi-active system. So compared with the previous generation, they now say it's been tuned for more precise and consistent damping, and that's as a result of some new sensors along with a revised fork construction. Wheels are still cast aluminium with a 19-incher up front, a 17 at the rear, and then you've still got Brembo brakes as well with a pair of 4-pot radially mounted calipers at the front on 320mm discs, and a 2-pot Brembo caliper at the rear on a 267mm disc. Now onto the ergonomics, which have also been updated a bit, and I assume this will trickle down in a couple of days to the base Super Adventure S. And so while the seat height remains pretty much the same, so it's adjustable between 847mm and 867, so that's I think 2mm down on the previous gen, it's actually the foot pegs that they've paid particular attention to, so they sit 8mm lower and 10mm wider apart, and they say this is going to give you much better comfort over distance owing to the fact that it opens up your knee angle. Bodywork is also slightly changed and they've given it a new windscreen design as well, so potentially you might find it a bit more comfortable in terms of wind blast over distance as well. Now one of the other big features along with AMT that they're talking about quite a lot this year with KTM is the fact that they've got this new massive TFT display which can either be in a very wide landscape mode or this more rally-inspired portrait mode that you get on this Super Adventure S EVO. So yeah, it's 8.8 inches, which is really quite big. There aren't that many dashes that big on the market. I think BMW do a 10-inch dash on some of their bikes, but even the GS is a little bit smaller than that. And so yeah, with lots of screen space, I'm expecting it to be really quite nice to use, and also is a touchscreen, which you don't always get. And so with some of the more tricky settings and things like that, it might make it that little bit more easy to navigate. Also, they've anticipated the fact that, you know, jabbing it with your fingers is going to mess it up, so I think it's got some kind of anti-fingerprint coating. Generally as well, I'd say KTM are great at laying out the sort of interface of their dashes and using all these nice graphics to make it look really intuitive with all the different settings and rider aids, so this is one of the main features that I'm really looking forward to trying out when I get to review one of these. Now naturally, the styling has had quite a significant update as well. I mean, it is largely the same idea, very angular, very orange, but just with that new LED headlight that's in line with some of the other more recent bikes in their lineup, like the 1390 Super Duke or the 990 Duke. Generally, I'd say KTMs aren't necessarily always my cup of tea, but I do think this is a move in the right direction because it really is very modern and edgy, and so it's KTM being even more KTM and leaning into what they do best. But as always, looks are subjective, so I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below. No price on this one as of yet, and I don't believe we'll get one in the next couple of days, but I'd expect it to be up around the 20 grand mark realistically, because that's what you pay for a well-spec'd R1300 GS, and also for the Multistrada V4 and a top-spec Tiger 1200, so those are realistically the main closest competitors, and I can't imagine they're really going to be able to undercut it so much with all those features like the radar tech and the AMT. As always, I'd love to know what you think of it, so do let me know down in the comments below, and would you be tempted by one of these with the AMT box, or would you just go for the standard bike, or would you just go for a good old GS with that big flat boxer twin? I'll also put my review of the previous generation on the screen now, so you can give it a click and give it a watch in advance of being able to review this one. Do hit subscribe as well if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this and all the latest bike announcements right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.